David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We had a bunch of interesting elections yesterday. A very important reminder, useful reminder that we don't just have a presidential race going on right now. We have 435 House seat elections coming up in November, many primaries for those happening in the months leading up. We have 35 Senate elections and the possibility that Democrats would be able to take over the Senate. We've looked at that. And yesterday, there were a bunch of interesting primaries that I want to talk about today. Not at all surprisingly, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a primary challenger who she easily defeated. The challenger was Michelle Caruso Cabrera, a CNBC host, former Republican, running now as a Democrat, and AOC easily won. As of right now, looks like AOC had about 73% of the vote in that race. Because that's such a blue district, the primary is essentially the general election. Like, there will be a Republican on the ballot against AOC in November, but the fact that she won the primary all but guarantees that AOC will get a second term in the House of Representatives. Another race that we were watching very closely and will continue to watch closely now that we have a primary winner is the Democratic challenger against Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for his Kentucky Senate seat. Mitch McConnell has been one of the most successful Republicans from the measurement, from the standpoint of what he's been able to achieve. As many of you know, an excellent and effective tool for the right in getting a bunch of judges confirmed, holding open a seat on the Supreme Court that should have been Barack Obama's to replace with Merrick Garland, obstructing Mitch McConnell that seat for long enough that Donald Trump ended up getting to choose Neil Gorsuch. An incredible coup victory for Republicans. Horrible for the world, horrible for the country, never should have been allowed to happen. But if you're a Republican, certainly Mitch McConnell has been effective. He has a serious primary challenge, and Amy McGrath seemed to be the leader going into the primary. Over the last couple of weeks, there was some energy around Charles Booker, a more progressive alternative in the Democratic primary. But indeed, Amy McGrath has won there with about 45% of the vote. That's a plurality. Charles Booker only with about 36% of the vote. So we will see Amy McGrath challenge Mitch McConnell. We've said before, it's a very uphill battle, but even getting Mitch McConnell to have a fight, even forcing Republicans nationally to have to spend money to defend Mitch McConnell's seat is great. And she could actually win. Amy McGrath was up by 1 point, a tie within the margin of error, statistically speaking, a couple of weeks ago. That's going to be a great one to watch. Interesting Republican primary in North Carolina to mention, where a 24-year-old guy defeated the Trump-endorsed candidate in the Republican primary for a House seat. His name is Madison Cawthorn. Trump endorsed his opponent, Linda Bennett. This is the 11th congressional district in North Carolina. That's the seat that was formerly held by Trump's now latest chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who's a horrible, horrible guy. Unofficially, Cawthorn won very easily by about a 75-25 margin. This is a notable defeat for the Trump-endorsed candidate, but it's important to remember that the guy that won, Cawthorn, he also loves Trump. Trump endorsed his opponent, but this is not like an anti-Trump Republican that won. Cawthorn loves Trump. It's just that Trump picked somebody else. So either way, if he wins in November, it's still horrible. Interestingly, he's not even old enough to serve as of right now, but because he will be 25, by the time he would be inaugurated, he's allowed to be on the ballot. He will go on to face the Democratic candidate, Mo Davis, and that's a Republican-leaning district. So at a sort of background level, at a base level, that is one that favors Republicans. There are 4 congressional candidates who support Medicare for All who won primaries yesterday. Richie Torres, Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones, and Dana Balter. So that's interesting and important, and we'll see what happens with their races in November. And then a really interesting story out of Virginia. Dr. Cameron Webb, I call him WebMD. That's how I refer to him, but officially Dr. Cameron Webb. He won the Democratic primary in Virginia's 5th district, and he will probably face off against Republican Bob Good in November. That would be a really great seat to turn from red to blue. Webb ran hugely on affordable health care. He's a physician. He was leading with 68% of the vote last I checked. So that's a big win for him. That actually is a traditionally Republican district, which is flippable. And Virginia has been what would I call it? Virginia has been a realistic focus of going blue. We've seen many elements of Virginia go blue over the last 8-10 years. And officially that race leans Republican, but it is a winnable seat. And we'll just have to see how the campaign shakes out. It's a wild district in that last election cycle, Republican Denver Riggleman won the seat by about 6 points and then was removed by the local Republican convention because he officiated a gay wedding for 2 of his old friends and campaign staffers, which is Virginia's been getting pulled blue. It is still Virginia, and this stuff still exists there. So a number of interesting races. This ties into how will we vote in November and the discussions of absentee ballots and vote by mail. We'll be talking about that later today. The desire for scientists and educators and doctors, at least on the Democratic side, seems partially to be related to what we've been seeing with coronavirus and the failed federal response in the United States. And that's exactly where I want to go next. I hate that I was correct. I really do. But months ago, I told you, other countries are getting coronavirus under control. We are not. It is looking more and more like at some point, travel is going to open back up, Asia to Europe, Europe to wherever, it doesn't matter, Europe to Australia. And the United States is likely to be banned from entering a lot of these countries. Why? Because they've got it under control. We don't, and they don't want us bringing the disease there. And unfortunately, that is exactly what is happening. Europe reportedly plans, according to a report in the New York Times, to ban American travelers indefinitely because we are failing hard on coronavirus. Now, when I say that we're failing, we haven't all failed. That's the reality. Some of the best places in the world to be right now, places that have seen the most rapid decrease in cases, are in the United States. I am fortunate to live in one of those places, Massachusetts. But on the other side of the coin, many of the worst places to be in the world are in the United States. And if you are Switzerland or you are Spain or France, you can't, practically speaking, say people from Massachusetts can fly here, but people from Arizona can't. And the United States is going to be judged by our worst performing states. And unfortunately, the worst performing states right now are some of the worst places in the world to be. So what's going on is that on July 1st, Europe is going to reopen its borders to international travelers. And they've put together a list of countries that are not going to be allowed to come in, people from countries that are not going to be allowed to come in. The list is still being finalized. The United States is reportedly on the list. China is believed to be on the list. Uganda, Cuba, Vietnam. It looks like Brazil and Russia, which are disastrous hotspots, they are believed to be on the list. Now, on a personal level, this bothers me, but that's not what this is really about. I mean, I was planning to maybe be able to go to Europe at the end of summer if things were better there and things were better here. But they're terrible here at the national level. And so I'm not going to be allowed to go. Okay, sad for me. But there's a much bigger picture here because this is a huge blow to the prestige and respect of the United States around the world. We've already been a laughingstock since Donald Trump was elected. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And this is really an indictment of the job that Donald Trump has done, or maybe better said, not done on the issue of coronavirus. Trump is so unstable. We know how he's going to react to this. And it's really tragic how terribly some parts of our country are doing. For example, if you look at Spain, you see that their cases have just fallen off a cliff. Such small numbers in Spain lately. You look at Switzerland. Switzerland has absolutely crushed the curve, looks amazingly good. I could go on giving you more and more examples. New Zealand, many places in Europe and around the world. Here in the United States, there are places that are looking very good. One of the places that has seen the fastest decline in cases, I'm proud to say, I'm happy to say, is right here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we are doing very well. And, we could say, hey, listen, we have an airport. We have all sorts of flights to Europe. But sadly, because anybody can just come to Massachusetts from Florida or Arizona or Texas, we're not going to be allowed into Europe. And indeed, when you look at the numbers in some of these other states, you look at Texas. Texas set a new record. Each of the last 2 days, Texas had more than 5,000 coronavirus cases, 2 days in a row. The last couple of days in Florida, around 3,500 cases per day. In fact, they've been there for close to a week. Yesterday's Trump rally location, which we will discuss later, Arizona, hitting their single day record yesterday, same day as a Trump rally. Doesn't really bode well for 10 days from now, but more than 3,500 new cases in Arizona yesterday for the first time. So we have to realize that we are the bad eggs here. We are that country that around the world, along with Brazil and Russia and India, I mean, we're not unique in this way, but we are one of the worst. We are one of those bad eggs that around the world they say, hey, we're doing well. Many countries are doing well. Let's start to restart economies and let people in. But we've got to keep the bad actors out. We are one of the bad actors right now. Now, this should not come as a shock. Our president admitted on Saturday that he wanted testing slowed down. He confirmed it yesterday. I'll have video for you later. So when you hear the president wanted less testing, it shouldn't come as a huge surprise that we're not doing so well. Now, I hesitate to even open up this can of worms because it's being considered, I'm going to mention it. There is the possibility that some of the states that are doing better are going to look at banning travel from other American states. This is very complicated legally because of the law, Paul v. Virginia, from, I believe, 1869. The Supreme Court defined freedom of movement in the United States as right of free ingress to other states and egress from them. And that seems very cut and dry, but there's many different layers and overlapping precedent when it comes to what is there in terms of what states can do to say, we're not letting people in from Florida or we're not letting people in from Texas. There are discussions happening about northeastern states saying, we don't want people coming here from those other places. Could be Massachusetts, New York is looking at it. Is it possible that if certain states did that, they would be allowed to send people to Europe on planes? We don't know. And it really depends more on Europe than it does on us. The legal questions are complex. This is also going to cause absolute and total chaos, and it is going to start to get very ugly in the United States if you start seeing, and it's being considered now, certain states saying we are sort of going to isolate our state as if it were its own country. And I mean, listen, I'll maybe leave it there for now. If that happens, there will be many more conversations to have. Before we go to the break, I want to say thank you. We had something very special happen yesterday on the show. Yesterday, we've been doing the show for years and years and years. Yesterday, the same day, right, June 23rd, we had our best day for the audio podcast ever. You go back to the start of the audio podcast, we had more listens to the audio podcast yesterday than ever in David Pakman Show history. Also yesterday, on the same day, we had more people watch our clips on Facebook than ever before. So yesterday was the best day in the David Pakman Show's history, storied history, controversial history, ever in terms of Facebook views and podcast downloads. And I just have you guys to thank. I so appreciate it. We're going to be taking a couple days off the rest of this week to kind of put together a nice 4-day weekend. I think everybody deserves it. We've been going straight through really since we got back from the end of 2019 break because of coronavirus. There's nowhere to go. So we've been going straight through. So we'll be taking some much needed time off the next couple days. I'll be coming to you from a very special location next week, and then we'll do one extra day off around the 4th of July weekend. But thank you to everybody. Let me know where your state is in terms of the virus. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. We'll take a quick break and be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Phoebe Spoor and Gisela Hetlevig. Thanks to Phoebe and Gisela. I so appreciate your support. And I also want to say thanks to today's longtime sustaining member of the day. It's Milton McGorrell. Milton's been a member almost 5 years. I'm inviting you right now. This is the invitation. To grab a membership at joinpakman.com. We are primarily funded by viewers and listeners who sign up at joinpakman.com. Okay, it's been a couple weeks since we've had any Hatriot Mail on the program. Now, there's been no shortage of me receiving it. We've just had so many stories to cover. I do want to get some Hatriot Mail in front of you today. Just a quick reminder about what Hatriot Mail is.
Why don't you take some hydroxychloroquine for that Trump derangement syndrome? Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Okay, let's get right into it. This is, we've seen a lot of disregard for the Constitution and the First Amendment and the rule of law lately from people who claim to be constitutional conservatives. That's the context through which we should consider today's Hatriot Mail.
See, what you fail to realize, David Parkman, is that your talk pisses off a lot of patriotic Americans. Your talk is treason, and you should be tried and executed. And it's punks like you who will get the coming Civil War started. Guess what happens then, you f***ing traitor? You are held accountable for your treasonous words.
Yeah, so if there's going to be a civil war, it will be because the people who would still be on the pro-slavery Confederacy today are going to take up guns and try to start a civil war. The civil war is not going to be started by people who want health care for everybody, right? The civil war is not going to be started by those who believe that we should have proper oversight and reform of police departments. That civil war is going to be from people who still think that the Confederacy was the right side of the actual Civil War. It seems it's not just Trump throwing around the word treason, as he did yesterday about Barack Obama. It's also Hatriots that are doing it. Remember that you can fight Hatriotism by using the coupon code Hatriot40. We have this code Hatriot40. It chops 40% off of the cost of a membership on my website. And the Hatriots cry every time it's used. It's spelled Hatriot 40. Let's talk a little bit about Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is a linguist and a philosopher. He's now 91 years old. And he's had some pretty damn good takes lately that have unfortunately really rattled and shaken up a slice of the American left wing that's very, very anti-Joe Biden. So as an example, a few months ago, maybe it was a month ago, Noam Chomsky said, of course I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, and everybody should vote for Joe Biden. And that was the take, and it was not particularly controversial. But there were a lot of people who were very upset with Noam Chomsky, saying that he has sold out in some way. But I was glad to hear him say it, because there's definitely crossover between Bernie fans and Chomsky fans, and not all of them agree that voting Trump out to replace him with Biden is good. Now, I believe that that is good. That is the right decision to make. So does Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky was recently interviewed by Michael Brooks, who has some clips on our channel if you go back in the archives a little bit. And Chomsky said, Trump is undeniably the worst criminal in history. And what I like about this is that Chomsky has shown a commitment not to allow the forest to be missed for the trees. When people start getting into, well, back in the 90s, Biden didn't take Social Security cuts off the table. So that means he's running today on cutting Social Security. It's like, hold on a second. Biden is not running on cutting Social Security today. In the 90s, Biden said, I wouldn't preemptively take it off the table in a negotiation. While I disagree with what Biden said in the 90s, that was almost 30 years ago, and he's not running on that now. And Trump is an evil madman who must be removed. Noam Chomsky has been very good at distilling that every time he's asked about this. And he does it here in this interview as well. Let's look at a sort of condensed transcript. And I actually want to read through it because this really matters. Noam Chomsky said, quote, "This sounds strong, but it's true. Trump is the worst criminal in history, undeniably. There has never been a figure in political history who was so passionately dedicated to destroying the projects for organized human life on Earth in the near future. This is not an exaggeration. People are focused now on the protests. The pandemic is serious enough that we will emerge from it at a terrible cost. The cost is greatly amplified by the gangster in the White House who has killed tens of thousands of Americans, making this the worst place in the world for the coronavirus. We will emerge from the pandemic, but we're not going to emerge from another crime that Trump has committed, the heating of the globe. The worst of it is coming. We're not going to emerge from that. The ice sheets are melting. They're not going to recover. That leads to exponential increase in global warming. Arctic glaciers, for example, could flood the world. Recent studies indicate that on the present course, in about 50 years, much of the habitable part of the world will be unlivable. You won't be able to live in parts of South Asia, parts of the Middle East, parts of the United States. We're approaching the point of 125,000 years ago when sea levels were about 25 feet higher than they are now, and it's worse than that. The Scripps Oceanographic Institute just came out with a study that estimated that we are coming ominously close to a point similar to 3 million years ago when sea levels were 50 to 80 feet higher than they are today. Noam Chomsky goes on to say, quote, "All around the world, countries are trying to do something about it. But there is one country which is led by a president who wants to escalate the crisis, to race toward the abyss, to maximize the use of fossil fuels, including the most dangerous of them, and to dismantle the regulatory apparatus that limits their impact. There is no crime like this in human history. Nothing. This is a unique individual. And it's not as if he doesn't know what he's doing. Of course he does. It's as if he doesn't care. If he can pour more profits into his pockets and the pockets of his rich constituency tomorrow, who cares if the world disappears in a couple of generations? As far as the government is concerned, we're seeing something pretty interesting. Parliamentary democracy has been around for 350 years, starting in England in 1689, with the so-called Glorious Revolution, when sovereignty was transferred from the royalty to the parliament. The beginnings of parliamentary democracy in the U.S. came about a century later. Parliamentary democracy is not just based on laws and constitutions. In fact, the British Constitution is maybe a dozen words. It's based on trust and good faith, the assumption that people will act like human beings. And then after Chomsky talks a little bit about Richard Nixon and George W. Bush, Chomsky goes back to, quote, "It goes deep into issues well before Trump, but he is a unique phenomenon. Again, the worst criminal in human history. So his minor crimes are to destroy American democracy and to amplify a pandemic killing over 100,000 people. But those are minor crimes by his standards." What's so important about this is that Chomsky distills the importance of not messing around with these sidebar arguments. What we're seeing is as bad as I and others have been saying. Much of it, the incompetence, the authoritarian tendencies, the ruined global alliances, the worsening crisis of climate change while Trump doesn't care, they were all completely predictable from day one, and I was not unique in predicting it. I'm not taking any unique credit for predicting it. This is not a time for maybe I'll stay home, or maybe I don't care, or I don't really like Biden, or whatever. You contribute to the worsening of the problem if you do that. That's how critical this is. And I'm so glad that we are hearing it from Noam Chomsky. We'll have some of these Chomsky quotes on the show's Instagram page at David Pakman Show. Make sure you're following us there. Also, make sure you're following me on Instagram at david.pakman. I posted a video of how I now drink water. Might be interesting to some of you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
This is very interesting. Donald Trump said during an interview this week that, yes, he is planning to get people a second stimulus check. Trump was interviewed by Joe St. George. He was asked about a second stimulus check, and he said that that's the plan. He wouldn't say when or for how much. Let's take a look at that bit of the interview.
I have a lot of viewers in Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan who are still struggling economically, sir. They spent all of that first stimulus check. Are you going to get them a second stimulus check?
Yeah, we are. Look, we had this...
When are you going to get it?
We had this going better than anybody's ever seen before. We had the best job numbers, the best economics, the best economy we've ever had. And then we had the virus come in from China, and now we're rebuilding it again. We will be doing another stimulus package. It'll be very good. It'll be very generous. And
how much? How much? People want to know.
You'll find out about it. You'll find out.
When are you going to do it? When are you going to announce it?
I think over the next, I think it's going to be bipartisan. I think it's going to be over the next couple of weeks, probably.
Now, this is fascinating for a few different reasons. You might remember that about a month ago, maybe it was 5 weeks ago, it was pretty clear that the Trump administration didn't really have the appetite for another round of payments, another stimulus check. And I think that there were two reasons for that. First of all, there were so-called economic concerns about the cost of doing another stimulus check. A lot of the people on Trump's side politically are so-called debt and deficit hawks, even though they don't really understand those mechanisms economically. But it seemed that that was part of the lack of appetite. But maybe even more importantly, they were against committing to a second round of stimulus checks 4 to 6 weeks ago because they wanted to pretend that everything would be fine by now and back to normal and that you simply wouldn't need another round of stimulus checks. Now, of course, this is very much not the case. And in fact, a ton of people entitled to their first check haven't even received it. 35 million stimulus checks are still outstanding as of mid-June. And at the same time, Trump can't say or he won't say how much money would be included in the second stimulus. And the reason he can't say that is the truth is it's not clear that Republicans want to do another round of stimulus. And to me, this signals what's going on behind the scenes. Democrats want stimulus because Democrats think people deserve it, given how bad the situation with the coronavirus continues to be. Many Republicans don't want another stimulus because they're so-called debt and deficit hawks. Trump only wants a second stimulus because he sees the polls and he's panicking. And as more checks go out, he envisions that he is essentially buying himself more votes. That's really what's going on here. And there are even some officials in the Trump administration that are not on board with doing another round of stimulus. It's not clear Republicans in the House are going to go for it. It's not clear Republicans in the Senate are going to go for it either. There have been some internal discussions where Trump has said straight up, he believes sending out more checks will help boost the economy and help him get reelected in the fall. Like, period, full stop, end of story, which is exactly what it seems to be to me. Stephen Mnuchin has been in favor of another round of checks. Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, seems to have been opposed. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has been against another round of payments. Democrats want even larger payments than the first time around. And Donald Trump here seems to be with the Democrats, not for economic reasons, not for moral reasons, but because he believes sending checks out again will help get him reelected in November. Trump is effectively trying to buy his way to reelection with another round of checks. The right loves to attack the left as wanting to buy people's votes with things like health care and properly funded education, for example. Now, those arguments are quite silly. What we're talking about is establishing a well-run society, given that we're one of the richest countries in the world, much like many Northern European countries have been able to do. But Trump is actually saying, allegedly behind the scenes, if we start sending checks out to people, I'm going to get more people to vote for me. Now, the other thing here is Trump may be setting himself up to say, look, I wanted another round of checks, but they wouldn't okay it. They will be framed as Democrats, even though here Democrats do want it. And it seems like it's Republicans that aren't actually interested. In terms of the timing, there's a bit of a conundrum. July 3 to 17 is what's called a state work period for the Senate, meaning they will be in their states rather than in Washington, D.C. So what this means is there's no way this gets done before July 3rd. I mean, we've got, before July 3rd, we have the next 3 days, then we've got a weekend, and then we have a few days next week. You're not going to pass another round of stimulus checks before next Friday. That means the conversation won't even really be meaningful until after the Senate returns after July 17th. So if this process starts on July 17, when could this even potentially be done? Are we looking at August? Are we looking at September? And remember, 35 million still haven't gotten their first check or deposit, which means that even if you get this passed in late July or August, you could have people who still will have not received their checks until close to the presidential election in November. So I don't know whether it can even be done. It doesn't seem Trump wants it for any reason other than he sees it as a way to buy himself some votes. And we also have no idea what might even be going on by the time that this actually gets done in late July, early August. We may not even have a break between waves 1 and 2 in coronavirus as we see the virus continues to rage in many states across the country. Very unpredictable, but Donald Trump now panicking and saying, yeah, let's get more checks to people. And a lot of this has to do with the polls, which I want to talk about next. We have interesting new polls from the last 2 days. They are both terrible for Donald Trump, but I actually want to do a little bit more of a deep dive and look at the internals of one of these polls. So big picture, 2 new polls. Tuesday poll from Harvard Harris says Biden is up 12. A poll from the New York Times today says Joe Biden is up 14, which is absolutely stunning. But let's focus in on some of the details of today's New York Times poll. In this poll, Joe Biden is up 50 to 36. That's a 14-point lead. You also have 14% of respondents under the other category. That includes people planning to vote third party, people that are as yet undecided. So you still have a lot in that other category. Now, there are 2 particular areas that are really hurting Donald Trump. Number 1 is his response to coronavirus, and number 2 is Trump's handling of race relations. 60% of the country believes Trump has mishandled coronavirus. That's important because it is dramatically higher than Trump's approval, and it shows us that there is a big net deficit that Trump is experiencing thanks to his absolutely disastrous handling of the virus. That includes among white voters and men. Typically, white voters and men favor Trump. Even among white voters and men, there is significant dissatisfaction with Trump's handling of coronavirus. Then on race relations, 61% of voters say they disapprove of Trump's handling of race. Only 33% approve. These are 2 of the most one-sided areas where Trump is underwater. Now, a couple of other interesting things from this poll. Democrats and Republicans right now, according to the New York Times poll, equally support their party's candidates. It is independents that are sort of making the difference for Joe Biden. So take a look at this. 85% of Democrats say they're going to vote for Joe Biden. 85% of Republicans say they're going to vote for Donald Trump. That's even. There are actually more Republicans nationally than Democrats. So in a sense, that favors Donald Trump. But independents are leaning towards Biden by a 21-point margin, which is huge. And then also interesting, the Trump campaign has been pushing the idea that Biden is too old to be president. Remember, Trump turned 74 about 10 days ago. Joe Biden's 77 as of right now. 60% of voters disagree that Joe Biden is too old. So we don't know what's going to happen between now and November, but the key numbers I'm looking at are, number 1, an incumbent president polling only 36% 4 months before the election is not good. Number 2, Oh, and let me say a little bit more about that. In head-to-head re-election campaigns, so when you've had a strong third-party candidate, the numbers are different. When you really have a head-to-head matchup for president, the worst performing incumbent president was John Adams, who got 39% of the vote in 1800. Even the wildly unpopular Herbert Hoover still got 40% of the vote against FDR in 1932. I don't think Trump will be under 40, no matter what. But if Trump ends up with anywhere close to where he's polling now, 42, 44, even 45% of the vote, this could be a historic defeat if we actually go out and vote. That's one metric that's important. Trump polling in the 30s 4 months before the election. The other really important metric is that Joe Biden is regularly polling over 50% or more in polls. If you look at polling at this point in 2016, Hillary Clinton was only occasionally polling 50%. And when she was, it really didn't go any higher than 51, 52. Joe Biden is regularly polling 50% or even more. And the reason that matters is that the undecided vote, the unsure vote, the third party vote, as you get closer to election day, it often will consolidate or move towards the incumbent. In this case, the incumbent is Trump. What matters about Biden regularly being at 50% or more is that Biden doesn't need to get any more support to win if we don't get complacent and go out and vote. We could see the economy tick up a little bit if coronavirus gets under control. It's only a blowout in November if we go out and vote, and that's a real question mark. So now that we've looked at all the polls, what you should do is go out there pretending as if every single one of these polls says Trump is winning by one, right? The idea, the mentality you should have is, I don't care what the polls are. I need to act as if my vote alone could give a state to Joe Biden. Of course, it's not literally the case, but that's the attitude that we should have. And we'll continue following the polls. We'll continue following Trump's internals among independents, on coronavirus, on race relations. But in the end, at the end of the day, we all need to say on November 3rd, what would I be doing right now if my vote could be the vote that swings this election from Trump to Biden? Oh, I'd go out and vote. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And of course, many of us will vote early. Many of us will be voting absentee. And that just means we have the opportunity to lock our vote in even sooner. We don't even have to wait until November 3rd.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, so we're continuing to talk about testing, and Donald Trump has now confirmed that he was not kidding when he said slow down coronavirus testing. The White House has been tripping all over itself for days to say Trump was just joking. Trump was then asked, were you joking? And he said, I don't kid. And yet the White House just keeps saying, oh, he's kidding. He's kidding. This is borderline criminal, and it's definitely murderous. And I want to be sure that you have all of the facts to understand this story. So instead of going through this story, however else I might do it, I'm going to go through the story chronologically for you. Okay. So the start of the story is the United States failed on coronavirus testing from day one. The U.S. and South Korea got our first cases at the same time, within hours of each other. We didn't develop a test quickly. We didn't roll out a test quickly. We didn't contact trace and isolate. South Korea did. They dominated the virus. We are leading in cases and deaths. So that's like the quick summary. That gets us to Saturday. Saturday, at his Corona rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Trump admitted for the first time, I told them to do less testing in order to find fewer cases. This is from Saturday.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people. You're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests that people don't know what's going on. We got tests. We got another one over here.
So this is, of course, completely outrageous. It's a president admitting that for political reasons, he asked for something that leads to more death. The White House reaction was he was just kidding. Spokespeople said it was just a joke. Representatives said it was sarcasm. So then on Monday, Joe St. George interviews Trump and asks him, did you order coronavirus testing to be slowed down? Trump doesn't really answer the question, but he does say a lot of words. Take a look.
On Saturday night, you said that you told your staff to slow the testing down to improve the numbers. Does that mean someone watching this right now on their local news is not going to get a test because you asked your staff?
We do more testing than any country in the world by far, 25 million tests. Other countries do 1 million. Every time you do a test, as you do more tests, it shows more and more cases. So we're so far advanced, both in terms of the quality and the amount, and we're doing all these tests and it shows cases. If other countries aren't doing, or if we did slow it down, we wouldn't show nearly as many cases.
So here, Trump doesn't deny that he asked for less testing. He simply says, if we did less testing, we'd have fewer cases. And again, reporters ask the White House and the Trump campaign, did he really order testing to be slowed down? Because he didn't deny it. He was given the chance by Joe St. George to deny it, and he did not deny it. And the White House again says it's a joke. The campaign says he was kidding, et cetera, et cetera. So finally yesterday, Donald Trump is asked straight up, were you kidding? Because people are saying you were kidding. Were you kidding? And Trump says, I don't kid.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world.
So Trump goes into the same talking point again, but the key phrase is, I don't kid. He was not kidding when he asked for testing to be slowed down. He was not kidding when he said that he asked for testing to be slowed down. Are they also going to say that him saying he doesn't kid was a form of kidding? Like, what's left at this point from this crumbled attempted defense of Donald Trump? He's given chance after chance. He's presented with opportunity after opportunity to improve his answer. Like, it's a do-over in a sense. And he just restates what he said on Saturday night. He could clarify, oh, well, you know, I meant this other thing. He doesn't change it at all because it's the truth. It's like being allowed to retake a test after you're given all the answers, and you still put down all the same wrong answers from when you first took the test. I got an email saying, David, is this a confession to negligent homicide? Trump is admitting that he asked for something to be done, which he thought would be good politically, which leads to more deaths. I mean, maybe. I just don't even think this is the right direction to go. Like, Trump is not going to be held criminally liable in any way here. We essentially have, you know, I mean, it's kind of depressing, but for a couple years now, I've been saying November 3rd, 2020 is when we will have the opportunity to give him a consequence. We're talking about him like he's a little boy who's misbehaved, because essentially that's how he behaves. It wasn't going to be the Russia investigation. It wasn't going to be impeachment. It's not going to be removal under the 25th Amendment by his cabinet for being unfit. The opportunity for a consequence is November 3rd. And all of these disasters and tragedies are valid reasons to remove him. And hopefully we will do it because it's really the only opportunity that we have. Okay, so yesterday, Donald Trump had a rally indoors at a mega church in Arizona. You might be wondering, wait a second, let me check my notes. Arizona is one of the worst case growth coronavirus hotspots in the world, never mind the country. Is that the right place to have a big indoor rally? And you would be right to ask that question. Arizona is the state, indeed, with the largest percentage case increase in the last week or so. Cases up 48% in the last 8 days in Arizona. Cases just spiking hugely. So what does the president do? He holds a rally indoors at a huge church in Arizona. Now, before we even go further, people have been emailing me saying, how can a church hold a campaign event? Churches are given nonprofit tax exempt status. in exchange for not doing politics. Churches aren't allowed to do politics. And here they are hosting a Trump campaign event. And I agree. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, what we do know is that the rules against churches doing politics are rarely enforced. It is very rare that a church will actually be punished for doing politics, despite churches doing politics being banned. So I just don't have an answer. It's just we have no accountability. Now, faced with questions about the prudence, I'm not sure. Based on the questions about the wisdom of doing this rally in Arizona, given that cases are exploding in Arizona, the CFO of Dream City Church, this was held at Dream City Church, and Dream City Church has a CFO named Brendan Zastrow. They posted a video saying, we've installed a new air filtration system, by the way, manufactured by one of our congregants, and it kills 99.9% of coronavirus. Now, health experts and anybody with common sense immediately said that's not true. That's an absurd claim to make. Arizona State University scientists said it's an absurd claim to make. Quote, Matthew Scotch warned, quote, this is absurd and will not protect you. But here's the church saying that this is the situation. They've got a great air filtration system that will kill coronavirus. Take a look.
COVID-19 here at Dream City Church. We're probably the first church in the nation to...
Yeah, we've installed Clean Air EXP. We have a local Arizona company. It was technology developed by some members of our church, and we've installed these units, and it kills 99.9% of COVID within 10 minutes from independent testing.
It's ionization? Is that what it is?
Ionization. It's ionization of the air, and it takes particulates out, and COVID cannot live in that environment.
So when you come into our auditorium, 99% of COVID is gone,
That's
killed,
correct.
if it was there in the first place. So you can know when you come here, you'll be safe and protected. Thank God for great technology, and thank God for being proactive.
Amen.
Bless you guys.
I like how it's not ionization, it's ionization. Ionization. But it's all BS. Pronounce it however you want. It's all BS. Now, even if it were true that their ionization system kills the virus in some abstract way, if I'm standing right next to somebody and they don't have a mask and I don't have a mask, an air filtration system in the ceiling or in the walls is not actually going to protect me from the people that are right next to me without masks. So it's wildly irresponsible. It's absurd. And then there's the rally itself, which was a complete and total farcical gong show. Trump was visibly sweaty and disheveled the entire time, slurring badly, brought students up to speak during the event who were used as pathetic and horrible political props. Everything about it was horrible. Trump again going with this racist Kung Flu name for coronavirus, firing up the crowd with it. Imagine cheering for this. Take a look.
With COVID, did you ever notice? I said the other night, did anybody see my speech the other night on Saturday night? Yeah. So, what I said the other night, there's never been anything where they have so many names. I could give you 19 or 20 names for that, right? It's got all different names. Wuhan. Wuhan was catching on. Coronavirus, right? Kung Flu, yeah. Kung Flu.
Imagine 10 years from now, thinking back and saying, hey, remember when we went to that rally and Trump said Kung Flu? Wasn't that great? I mean, the place just absolutely loved it. And that's actually, I think that, you know, the focus really should be on the number of people that love this racist Kung Flu stuff. There's a lot of focus, understandably, on the fact that the president is calling it Kung Flu. And there should be focus on that because we shouldn't have a president who does that. There's no question about it. But the audience was filled with people who loved it. That's the problem. Trump saying it is a problem. But if that immediately repelled people from voting for him, we would say, okay, this is a madman racist, but nobody's voting for him. The crowd loved it. The audience, if you listen to that clip, the audience was actually shouting out Kung Flu. Trump started saying Wuhan virus, Chinese virus. The crowd is yelling Kung Flu. They want him to say it. They're delighted by the racism of it all. And I think that we want to distribute criticism fairly. And Trump saying this would not be nearly the problem that it is were it not for the fact that huge crowds of people absolutely love it. Now, here's Donald Trump in the same rally yesterday, railing against vote by mail, saying, listen, we voted in World War I and we voted during World War II.
Absentee ballots are fine. Absentee ballots are fine. Like I live in the White House. And if I can't get to Florida, or you live wherever you live, you can't. But you have to go through a process. Some people just can't make it to a polling station, and they have good reason, but they have to go through this process in order to verify their identity. People went to the polls and voted during World War I. They went to the polls and voted during World War II. We can safely go to the polls and vote during COVID-19.
Now, what's funny about this, or scary, is that vote by mail is absentee ballots. Like Trump seems not to get it, but what we're talking about is getting everybody an absentee ballot. It's just more of them. Trump seems to imagine that if it's vote by mail, it's different than the absentee ballots that he used and that he says are okay. And then Trump raises this issue about we voted during World War I and World War II. The wars weren't contagious pandemics, and soldiers during those wars did vote by mail. So it's like a completely irrelevant claim that Donald Trump is making. Trump also, as is very common now during these rallies, particularly ones that are happening later in the day, Trump having trouble speaking. Here he is talking about America's founders.
It's the same spirit that drove America's founders.
And then here's Donald Trump unable to say deployed. He says deplore instead.
And that's why when rioting and looting broke out in our nation's capital, I quickly deplored. I came in, I deployed the National Guard very quickly.
So it was a truly irresponsible mess. But the good news, like if there's anything even slightly reassuring about what we're seeing, is that Trump's polling is suffering very, very badly because of his handling of coronavirus. Trump is an incumbent president 4 months out from his reelection his potential reelection. And most national polls have him polling in the 30s. OK, that's a good sign in the sense that he's not as Teflon as he was once believed to be on race relations, on coronavirus, that new New York Times poll we talked about earlier. He's suffering badly. So even though he was able to fill a room with people cheering for Kung Flu, he is suffering in the polls. We just have to see whether it holds through to November. And that's why I was very cautious earlier today when talking about polling. The good news is maybe he can't actually get away with this stuff. Okay, we have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. It's been a long time since we heard from furious, angry Trumpist Jimmy from Philly. I know some people in the audience like Jimmy from Philly, others don't. It's been so long since we heard from him that I want to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain into my day. Envision this. I wake up, I come downstairs, I make my breakfast, I make my cappuccino, I bring it over and sit down in front of my computer, and it's time to see who called in overnight. We've got 50, 60, 70 voicemails that came in overnight at 219-2-DAVID-P. Uh-oh. I see 7 voicemails in a row from Jimmy from Philly. What's going on? I'm just going to play them for you. The imagery is I'm sitting there with my cappuccino listening to this. Take a listen.
David, Jimmy from Philly. When are you going to unshadow ban me from YouTube? And I don't want to hear it's your moderators. Believe me, you tell them to undo it, they undo it.
Right.
Come on, David. You're running the show here. You have a team. I know how it works, man. Yeah. Well, when are we going to get this show on the road here, David? What are you waiting for?
So, again, shadow ban. I have no idea what Jimmy's talking about. And he was just relentlessly calling in about this. Take a look at this.
David, Jimmy from Philly. I see I'm still shadow banned on your live show. Nice.
No idea what he's talking about and just continuing to pour in.
Jimmy from Philly, when are you going to take me off shadow?
Oh, and that one even got cut off. Here's another Jimmy
David,
from Philly.
Jimmy from Philly, you don't have the balls to announce that I joined? You are so disingenuous.
It's like
Take my call.
I have no clue what Jimmy's even talking about. And then I'll just do one more. There were more, but I'll just do one more for you.
So you couldn't call me out, David, and you're not going to have a call-in show. I want my money back, David.
I don't even know what money Jimmy's talking about. The last I was aware of was Jimmy had a membership, which he canceled months ago. I think he said because he was getting laid off or something like that. So that's a typical day for me preparing for the show. I don't envy me. Please don't envy me. We're going to have a great bonus show today. We are going to talk about Texas is now saying just stay home. Texas is wide open, right? Like Texas opened early and on paper Texas is open. But the governor, now that they're having 5,000 new cases a day, the governor is saying just stay home in Texas. We will talk about how in July, that enhanced unemployment, that $600 a week boost for coronavirus is coming to an end. And we'll talk about the economic implications. And we will also talk on the bonus show today about a state court decision that says police are not able to force you to unlock your phone. It's a very interesting case when it comes to what it means to do a search or seizure. And all of those stories and more will be on today's bonus show. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpacman.com. Remember that I am now bookable on Cameo. I'm David Pakman on Cameo. And lastly, don't miss the daily audio podcast. You can take it with you anywhere in your favorite podcast app. Don't miss it. Record day yesterday for the audio podcast. Very, very exciting for me.